Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. I'm pretty excited to film this video because I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. I think parenting is obviously one of the most important topics out there. It's about how we're raised. So I'm not going to waste any time, I'll just get right into it. People are sort of led to believe that as a parent, you are supposed to give your kid unconditional love. And I think it depends on how you define unconditional love. It depends on what you think that means. Does unconditional love mean that you are going to ignore behaviors that are inappropriate? Does unconditional love mean you're going to let things slide when you probably should have said something? Or does it mean that you are going to lead your child to believe that there is no scenario in which they are undeserving of love, that they are just sort of disposable, you know? I don't think anyone is disposable, and I don't think anyone should see themselves that way or see other people that way. Because if you can see other people that way, you're one step closer to seeing yourself that way. And just by knowing that it is possible to see someone that way, you're going to be afraid of people seeing you that way. And that can lead to a couple different things. It can lead to you avoiding facing the reality of situations in which you are doing something that would cause someone to see you that way. Then you won't even acknowledge that you did it, which might result in you not really apologizing if you hurt someone or something like that. And it can also result in people just hating themselves and judging themselves, and they will acknowledge it, but they'll go really hard on themselves, and they'll sort of hold themselves to the same standards that they hold other people to. And they hold other people to such ridiculous standards to the point where sometimes someone is just thought of as disposable. We'll just throw that person out. They're not worth a thought, you know? And I think that no one should feel that way. There's a difference between having healthy boundaries, making sure that you aren't being taken advantage of, and not loving someone. You can love someone and never see them again, never talk to them again, never think of them again. That doesn't mean that they're not lovable, that they're not loved. In fact, in some cases, that is the most loving thing that you can do for someone. So as a parent, you have to know that you are bringing up a new person. This is a huge undertaking, you know? This isn't something to take lightly. You have the responsibility to make sure that you're not messing it up, because the effects of that can be lifelong, and it can take them a really long time to recover from it. People who experience abuse in their childhood ironically grow up to be a lot more empathetic and mature, because they sort of had to learn at a very young age how to become their own parent. And I can attest to that. I'm very empathetic. I always think about other people. And I did sort of feel at a very young age like I had to take care of myself. Like I couldn't trust my caretaker to do what was needed to make me feel protected and safe. So I had to, and this wasn't all the time, but there were moments in my childhood when I was in the care of someone who didn't make me feel cared for. So that was enough, you know? So don't tell yourself that it has to be full-time or that your parents have to be awful people. It doesn't have to be that big of a deal. It doesn't have to be that deep. As a kid listening to this, thinking of your own childhood, if there were moments, maybe you just are a family with a lot of siblings, and because there were too many kids to take care of, you maybe were the oldest sibling or older, and you felt like you had to take care of your siblings and sort of be the parent. Whatever it was, as long as you, at a young age, felt like you needed to take care of yourself and struggle, that can lead to a couple different conclusions. Depending on who you are, you may find yourself kind of throwing yourself a pity party, feeling like a martyr, feeling like a victim, feeling like you always have to do everything for everyone and it's thankless and you never get anything back for it. Or you can just become really empathetic and, you know, just mature faster. And like I said, it just depends who you are. It could go either way. But it is, it's less likely for you to become really mature and empathetic if you are spoiled, if you're enabled, if your parents just ignore the temper tantrums you have. And there is a really specific scenario that I want to talk about. Picture you're in public, I was going to say in a store, but just in public anywhere, and you have a child with you. They're old enough to know better, old enough to know that, and even if they're like, I don't know, like 5, they are old enough to know that it's not appropriate to throw a temper tantrum in public. Because what is a temper tantrum? It's sort of a reaction to not getting what you want. And that shouldn't be indulged. You really should put a stop to that quickly. Ideally, if you're in public and your kid starts having a temper tantrum, you look at them and you say, knock it off. That's not appropriate. And you don't get emotional. What you don't want to do is you don't want to give the impression that you are afraid of what your child might do. You don't want to act helpless, like, I don't know what to do, my child's having a temper tantrum, because you show that in different ways. Sometimes you might literally look afraid, but other times you might choose anger. You're going to panic and resort to whatever means necessary. Maybe you'll spank the kid. Maybe you'll threaten to take away dinner. Maybe you'll threaten to take away their favorite toy or ground them for a week or whatever it is. You'll start frantically looking for anything that you can do to make them stop. You don't have to act afraid or say something to indicate that you're afraid. They will pick up on it if you are afraid, if you are embarrassed of them, because we communicate with energy. That's what we are. That's the only language that everyone is fluent in. And because it's the language that everyone's been speaking since they were born, it's the language animals speak. It's the easiest language to learn too. Easier than learning a new language like Spanish or English or anything. Energy is the language we know, and they will tell if you're afraid. They'll know. And that will send the message that they have all the power, that they can hurt you, they can make you afraid, which will in turn make them feel like their own parent. And if they're in a situation where they're having a temper tantrum, what they need is someone to show a sense of security and dominance, to show that they're taking care of it. They're driving the boat. You are not responsible for figuring it all out. But when your parent makes you feel like they're afraid, you feel like it's your responsibility, and you don't know what you're doing. You're a 5-year-old. You're having a temper tantrum in a store because you're not getting what you wanted or whatever. And now, with you sensing that you have the power to make your parent afraid, that not even your parent knows what to do, the burden of figuring out what to do falls on you. And that can be overwhelming, and that leads to that sense of, feeling like you need to take care of yourself. A lot of parents do this. A lot of parents don't really put their foot down, and when they do, it doesn't provide a sense of security. It doesn't provide a sense of, oh, the parent is taking care of me. Sometimes when parents, try to put a stop to inappropriate behaviors like that, they do it in a way that makes the kid almost feel attacked, like the parent is now the enemy, and they don't get it, which you can't control if your kid feels like you don't get it, but you don't want to drive that in. You don't want to feed that idea, because it's not going to make your kid feel better, and it's not going to make you feel better. It's certainly not going to strengthen your relationship. So what I would suggest is to just try to establish early on, before they're 5, before they're even, as soon as they're there, talk to them. I remember when I was a baby, I remember hearing conversations. I didn't understand everything, but I learned from hearing people talk. Talk to your baby. Don't talk to them like they're a baby. Talk to them like they're an adult. Tell them everything you know, and try to establish a level of trust so that your baby knows that they can trust you, and that if you say something, it's because you know what you're talking about, not because you just want to shut them up, or you just want to put them in their place, or you just want to, assert your power. It's not about power. It's about trust. It's about security. with a lack of security and stability, your child might feel like they have more power than they should. And that creates a really imbalanced dynamic. And that is how you get disobedience, where your kid is running off, doing extremely stupid and dangerous things and not telling you about it because they no longer respect you, because you don't respect yourself enough to provide that sense of stability. You are thrown off by their behavior, which, they're right then. They do have all the power. They can do whatever they want, and it's going to completely ruin your life. You don't want your kid to think that. You don't want your kid to feel like it's that easy for them to just switch the power dynamic on you. That's too much responsibility to put on your kid when they're that young. So let's start from the beginning. Parenting, what it ideally looks like. That's the problem. This is the solution. What it ideally should look like is you bring a baby into the world and you immediately try to teach them everything you know, to show them that you love them and that they don't have to work for it, they don't have to earn it. That love is just there, and it will be there no matter what. Now, you're human. There are going to be days where you don't act as you should. There are going to be moments where you say things you don't mean. But you have to make sure that your kid knows that the real you underneath it didn't say that, didn't mean that. That was just you kind of not really even paying attention to what you're saying. Sometimes we all say things that we wouldn't even really say, and we look back and we're like, why did I say that? I wasn't even thinking. Try to establish that connection with your kid. Show them that you're imperfect, but that you can take care of them, and that you're confident and that you can protect them, and that they don't have to worry until they're old enough to be on their own. And it's also, this is unrelated, but it's also really important to teach your kid about empathy and compassion. And don't just say, be nice to people. Don't, aggressively tell them about manners and stuff. I think that's how a lot of people try to teach empathy. Excuse me, I just burped a little bit. They say, treat people the way you want to be treated. Be polite, say please, say thank you. But they don't really explain why. And I think if you're going to teach your kid about empathy, you need to teach them the value of empathy, not just to be empathetic, but why to be empathetic. So what is empathy? Empathy basically just means considering how other people feel and are affected by what you say and do. Empathy means not just being an inconsiderate, selfish person who walks around leaving messes behind them and doesn't even look back. Empathy is consideration. It's compassion. And the value of that is that if you are the only person in the world, there's no reason to be empathetic. But because there are other people, and there really is no reason to believe that you are better than anyone else. For example, in a room filled with people of different status, rich, poor, royal, peasant, whatever it might be, when they're all dead, they're just corpses that are rotting and gonna be meaningless. There is no status in death. You're all just the same. And that's because status in life is kind of an illusion. It's not really about that one person is better than anyone else. It's just that some people work harder and earn more. And some people work harder to screw people over and manipulate people and get things that they really didn't earn in an honest way. And that isn't really theirs, And karma will take it back from them in time. But teaching your kid about karma, I think, is also important, because what is karma if not just a sense of balance in the universe, to believe that that actions have consequences, or at least that actions have reactions, that things don't just go unnoticed. I believe that's true. I believe that if you do something, there will be a reaction to it. If you steal from someone, now you have someone who you stole from, and they might come back after you. You didn't work for that. You didn't earn it. You didn't do it in an honest way. You screwed someone else over. You don't want to teach your kid to screw people over. You want to teach your kid why it's important. And it's because if you can do it to someone else, they can do it to you. That's the value of keeping your side of the street clean. If you can treat someone like crap, they can treat you like crap, and then some. And when you are treated like crap, your empathy increases, because you know how terrible it feels. And it becomes harder for you to inflict pain on others when you can think about how it felt when it happened to you. Like if you have someone beat you up, it becomes harder to justify beating someone else up. But there are also situations when the opposite happens. For example, a lot of rape victims or victims of child molestation, even victims of physical like punching and abuse in their childhood, often end up being the school bully or grow up to be child molesters or rapists themselves. And I think the reason for that is because if it happens at a young age, and that's mainly the thing. I wouldn't really say rape victims would rape other people, but certainly victims of child molestation and child abuse. That's because it's what you're being taught as a child. That's what you're learning when you're in development. And part of you sort of is learning that that's normal. That, an adult did something to you. Your dad, your uncle, they hit you, they abused you, they molested you, whatever it is. Part of your psyche registers that as, someone who is supposed to be a caretaker. We're taught as kids that adults kind of know everything and adults are like some superior type of being. So when they do something wrong, it's scary. And it leaves you with the impression that maybe that's normal. Maybe you should do that. And when you grow up, you can't even make sense of why you find yourself doing these things. It's so deeply programmed into you from such a young age. And that's why you really want to protect your kids. You want to protect your kids by educating them and letting them know how to protect themselves. And make sure that when you do that, you're teaching them to be confident. You're telling them that no one can really hurt them if they know that no matter what anyone else does to them, it's ultimately their own karma. And as long as you knew that you were defending yourself, you were protecting yourself, and you were doing everything you could, no matter what happens, it's up to you if you want to see it as hurt. You could see it as an opportunity to grow, to heal, and then have a thicker scar, and then be stronger from it. If it kills you, you might have to get into some spiritual beliefs, which I can't guarantee that you have, but I believe that if you die, there is still more to do. I believe in reincarnation, among other things. A lot of people are confused because I believe in psychic mediumship. I believe in, communicating with the dead and also reincarnation. And I think a lot of people are confused by that concept. They would think like, how can you believe in both of these things at the same time? If people are reincarnating, how can you talk to them when they're dead, and vice versa? And this is unrelated, but just on a little side note, that is kind of just because I think that it's all sort of happening in a way that's not something we're familiar with. Like I was saying at the beginning with energy, it's not the same thing as, having a body, having an identity. So I believe both are true. I'm not going to give you a complete explanation because that would take way too long and I would honestly have to do a separate video on it. But let me know if you want to know more about that. Or, if you don't believe in it, that's fine too. You don't have to. I certainly don't want to distract from the topic at hand by trying to convince you of something unrelated. So, yeah, in conclusion, unconditional love, in my opinion, means sometimes tough love. Sometimes it means showing someone that disrespectful and unempathetic behavior is not healthy. Because if you just allow someone to do whatever they want, let's see an example of a parent who just gives their kid everything, completely spoils them, lets them get away with everything. What has that created? Temper tantrum in a store situation. The child feels like they have too much power, and it also increases their expectations. I think it's important to understand that being, a bad person, it's not really possible. No one is a bad person or a good person. People just sometimes do bad things and do good things. But people are constantly changing. We always have the choice. People do stupid things sometimes, and you have the choice to do smarter things in the future. And I also want to emphasize there is no shame in being ignorant. Being ignorant simply just means you don't know something, which is not your fault. If you waste time being shameful about that and beating yourself up for not knowing something, that's time you could have spent trying to know something, learning something. So don't be hard on yourself. You don't deserve it. You do deserve love, but you have to be realistic about where you can find it. You have to know that if your parent is not giving you the love that you deserve, you will find it elsewhere. And you also have to know that no one really owes you anything. You know, um, it's hard because we do feel owed a lot of things. We do feel very entitled to things all the time. And it does depend on how you're raised. I think people who are raised and kind of spoiled, people who are raised to think that they can't really do anything wrong and they always deserve love, it's true that you deserve love, but that's not what love looks like. Love doesn't look like letting you get away with everything. Love doesn't look like constantly taking care of you without you having to do anything in return. Most any kind of relationship with another adult or with another human being, any kind of relationship with another human being is equal because they're human just like you. They're not better than you, they're not worse than you, and they don't owe you anything that you don't owe them. It's completely level playing field. You owe them just as much as they owe you, and you have to make sure that there is reciprocity. So you can't just run around expecting everyone to take care of you. And believe me, there are people who will. There are people who will give up everything to take care of you. And think of how unempathetic it is to just let someone do that. Let someone spend all of their time and energy that they could have spent either on themselves or on someone who would actually appreciate it. Instead, they're spending it on you, who feels entitled to it, doesn't appreciate it, and it's never even enough because you felt like it was owed to you. Yeah, the reality is that no one owes you anything. I also just want to mention real quick, this is just a thought that popped into my head. Situations where people provide, a lot of people manipulate others by saying, I give you this, I give you that, I bring home the food, I bring home the money, but that means you owe me this. No, it doesn't, because I didn't ask you to do any of that. In fact, I could be totally fine taking care of myself. I don't owe you anything. If you want something from me, you have to ask for it, and it has to be an agreed upon deal. If you say, well, let's have this, I will do this, and then you'll do this, that's fine because you agreed upon it. But if you just decide to do that and then you expect someone else to do something in return, that's almost like just randomly giving someone a gift and then expecting them to give you a gift in return. It's like, I didn't ask you to give this to me, I don't owe you another gift. It'd be nice if I gave you one, but it almost feels like you wouldn't deserve it if expecting something in return was the only reason you gave me a gift in the first place. That's not a gift at that point. That's a transaction. So yeah, there's just people who really don't understand how transactions work and when they're actually owed something. You are owed something if you had a deal with someone, if someone promised you something, and in a realistic circumstance. Some people promise things that they just realistically cannot keep, and it wouldn't be right to hold someone to that. Like, I promise to always take care of you no matter what. I promise to always drop everything I'm doing to help you out. That's not a realistic promise, and that is not a promise you should feel good holding someone to. People can say whatever they want. People can do whatever they want. And the reason people are so flighty and confused and not, all of the problems that I'm talking about, it all stems from how they're raised. That is a huge, huge factor in it. So make sure when you're raising kids, you're keeping all of this in mind. The best thing you can do, be honest with them, be straightforward, don't be afraid, make sure they know that they can trust you, and make sure that they know the value of empathy. Look at them, pay attention to their behavior, pay attention to how they treat people. It's really important. And make sure that you're nurturing it if you see that they are being really empathetic and compassionate, and teach them the value of honesty and just being. I think part of being compassionate and empathetic comes from an understanding of privilege, because what I see with a lot of people who are like really nice, really giving, is that they don't have the best boundaries, and they also don't have a strong sense of their own potential privilege. And what I mean by that is that, you know, maybe they have great resources to give, but it's just based on luck. They didn't earn it, they didn't work for it, it wasn't because they were smart. They might be really empathetic and really giving and compassionate, but they're not smart enough to know how to actually sustain anything. Um, so there is a little bit of a lack of empathy for their own circumstances. And self love, this is so important. You are no different than anyone else. We are all just as deserving of love as anyone. So that's why it has to be transactional when we're interacting with one another. But when it's just you thinking about whether or not you're deserving of love just as a being, that's never going to be the case. You're always deserving of love just for existing. But that doesn't mean someone else owes you their time and energy. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully, for the parents watching this, you can apply this to your parenting. And for the kids watching this, hopefully this was helpful if you look back on your childhood and you think about some things that your parents did or didn't do that you might have wanted them to do. And just kind of go back and sort of recreate those memories if you can. Just imagine them doing it. And that should help, you know, to sort of help you relive it. And also, habits take like 3 weeks to break, I think. So just change your way of thinking, catch yourself when you think something that you now know is not true, and watch some of my other uploads. I don't have very many at this point. Um, it should help to kind of break down this way of thinking that's just ultimately not doing us any favors. Thank you for watching. You'll see me next time you decide to watch something I post, which will be on Wednesday at noon. And I hope you have a good rest of your day or night. And again, thank you.